is On Point. I'm Meghna Chakrabarty. Now, if you're a regular listener to this program, you know that we here at On Point love numbers. Or at least I do. So here are some numbers. They're about kids. You know, the people who are supposed to be the future of this nation. And these are numbers, by the way, from a recent report from the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities. So here goes. 65 million. That's the number of kids who benefited from the expanded child tax credit last year. That's 90% of American children. Not Democratic American children or Republican American children, but all American children, 90% of them. Here's another 90%. That's the percentage of low-income families who spent the child tax credit on very basic needs like food, rent, clothing, and education. 10 million. That's the number of children who could fall back into poverty if the child tax credit expansion isn't continued, which at the moment it won't be. Because last month, the Biden administration's Build Back Better plan was essentially torpedoed by Senator Joe Manchin, Democrat of West Virginia, home to at least 300,000 children who used the tax credit for things like clothing and food.
I cannot vote to continue with this piece of legislation. I just can't. I've tried everything humanly possible. I can't get there.
You're done. This is a no.
This is a no on this legislation. I have tried everything I know to do.
Senator Manchin on Fox News in December. Now, Democrats are still looking for a way to extend the child tax credit, but yesterday, Manchin said he would refuse to support any measure unless it had a, quote, firm work requirement. Well, last year's expanded child tax credit included families with no income, which accounted for more than 80% in the temporary reduction in child poverty across the nation in 2021. Well, here's fellow Democratic Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont.
Well, I think he's going to have a lot of explaining to do to the people of West Virginia, to tell them why he doesn't have the guts to take on the drug companies and lower the cost of prescription drugs, why he is not prepared to expand home health care. West Virginia is one of the poorest states in this country. You got elderly people and disabled people who would like to stay at home or forced into nursing homes. He's going to have to tell the people of West Virginia why he doesn't want to expand Medicare to cover dental, hearing, and eyeglasses. I've been to West Virginia a number of times, and it's a great state, beautiful people. But it is a state that is struggling.
But come on, I mean, what does a Vermonter know about West Virginia, really? So here's a different voice. Joanna Vance of Beckley, West Virginia. She and her husband Edmund have lived in the state their entire lives. So did their parents and grandparents. Joanna is 32 and has 3 kids, ages 6, 7, and 11. She and Edmund both work, but it's not enough. So that $750 monthly child tax credit they received last year made all the difference.
After years, finally, our finances have gotten better. I took the child tax credit in July and I went and paid off all of our medical bills at the pediatrician's office because, we don't get state assistance and we don't have medical cards or anything like that. And especially with 3 kids, you have co-pays and deductibles with private insurance and it gets expensive. In August, of course, it was, more school shoes and school clothes and school supplies. In September, I took my child tax credit and we put 4 new tires onto one of our family vehicles. The tires were very dangerous. And that was the first time ever that we've been able to put 4 brand new tires on one of our vehicles. Usually we would get 2 used ones to put on the front 2 tires and then 2 used ones to put on the back. So many people have laughed at me about that. They're like, you've never been able to put new tires on your car? I'm like, well, it must be nice for you to have always been able to put 4 new tires on your car, I mean, we're not poor by no means, but we have 3 kids and a life and, we have to budget. You know, not receiving the child tax credit January, we're going to go back to having to budget and save for those things instead of having that extra money to do it when we get it. You know, the savings account that we've built up or that extra cushion, all it's going to take for that to go is the vehicle to break down or something in the house to need fixed. And then it'll just be right back to paycheck to paycheck.
That's Joanna Vance in Beckley, West Virginia. We'll hear a little more from her later in the program. But Kelly Allen joins us now. Kelly's executive director of the West Virginia Center on Budget and Policy. Kelly, welcome.
Hi, Meghna. Thanks for having me and for lifting up the voices of West Virginians in this conversation.
I should note that you're joining us from Charleston, West Virginia today. You know, Joanna is but one mom, in one family in West Virginia. And so tell me, I mean, how indicative is her story of West Virginian families more broadly?
I think it's really common. We are a research organization, and we talk a lot about the numbers, but we think it's really important to combine those numbers that can be a little impersonal with stories as well. And we've been talking to West Virginians around the state about both what the child tax credit has meant and what not receiving it in January would mean. And we hear a lot of those same stories. Folks have been able to get caught up on rent, buy groceries, invest in tutors or learning tools for their children as learning has been disrupted through the pandemic. And it's just given folks a peace of mind and a little bit of security and mental well-being that living paycheck to paycheck and enduring that stress has really been the case up to this point.
So give us a bit of a bigger picture here about sort of the economic profile of West Virginia families in particular. I should have the numbers right in front of me, but that's what we have you, Kelly, for. How much of the state's families are either living at poverty or close to poverty? And so just to give us a better understanding of the difference that those monthly payments, at least for over 2021, made.
Yeah, well, we have the fourth highest poverty rate in the country, as you mentioned. About 1 in 5 West Virginians live in poverty. And that's pretty high relative to the rest of the country. And these child tax credit payments have made a huge difference for households with children. And in West Virginia specifically, now that January is here and we know that those child tax credit payments aren't going to enter folks' bank accounts, that's 300,000 kids in our state are going to see their household incomes fall this month. And 50,000 of them are at risk of slipping back below the poverty line or into deeper poverty.
50,000 children.
Yes.
Wow. And those are children at risk of slipping back into poverty, but there's 250,000 more who won't be getting that expanded assistance as well. That's just to be clear. So
exactly.
Okay. So that's, if we're looking at the same set of numbers here, that 350,000, that's more than 90% of West Virginia's children.
Yeah, exactly. I think it was in the quote in the opening of the show, per capita, we're the most impacted state by the child tax credit enhancements because we've reached almost every child in our state.
Wow. Okay. So then tell me more about what families were doing or how they were trying to get by before the expanded child tax credit, at least helped pad things out for 2021.
Yeah, well, prior to the American Rescue Plan and the expansion of the child tax credit, we had really high food insecurity, high housing insecurity, and this was prior to the pandemic as well. West Virginia has been a state in poverty long before the pandemic, so it may be that Senator Manchin has seen the extended tax credit as a pandemic relief program, but I think we really know that this is something that we need in the long term to give families a little bit more economic security. So in the now, through 2021, we saw families saying that they've been putting food on the table and paying their rent and meeting their basic needs, paying medical bills with their monthly child tax credit payments. But one thing we've been asking folks is, what would it mean to know that you this CTC was going to be around a little bit longer, because you make a certain set of decisions when these payments are coming for 6 months. But if you know that you're going to have $250 to $300 per child in the longer term, we heard families say things like, we might move into a bigger house or purchase a home. We might be able to start a college fund or put our child in childcare, knowing that we could pay for that for more than 6 months. So I think just, the security too of knowing that the child tax credit would be around a little bit longer would have these really long-term impacts on families' ability to do better for themselves.
Yeah. So, we started off by talking about the expanded child tax credit because it has expired, right? So there's a bright line in terms of being able to understand the difference it has made for families. But when Senator Manchin last month said that he wouldn't support Build Back Better, he essentially torpedoed far more than just the expansion of the child tax credit. For now, he's completely undermined the many other plans that were in the Build Back Better plan. So expanded elder care, support for childcare, as you mentioned. What difference would those types of programs make for West Virginians?
I mean, looking at Build Back Better, I see it as a program designed for West Virginia and West Virginians. And that's why I was really surprised that Senator Manchin said that he couldn't support the bill in its current form. This is really a bill that seems targeted to the needs of folks in our state. 2/3 of West Virginians live in childcare deserts, places where there is not a childcare center at all or not enough slots for the number of children. We have an aging population, and this bill would address healthcare costs. So there's just so many pieces of it that I think are really targeted to West Virginia and would have outsized benefits for the folks of our state. Paid leave is another one.
Well, we're going to talk about all those other ideas and the impact they might have on West Virginia, and also some of the concerns that West Virginians themselves have, because cost is a concern. So Kelly Allen, stand by for just a moment. We are talking this hour about the difference that the Biden administration's Build Back Better plan, or at least the ideas in it, would have on the state of West Virginia. We'll have more in a moment. This is On Point.
This episode is brought to you by DirecTV Stream. Introducing DirecTV Stream, the best of live TV and on demand, which means you can get all your favorite sports, movies, and shows together, so you can watch new episodes of your favorite reality shows live or binge old episodes on demand. Either way, get ready for some drama. And the best part? DirecTV Stream has no annual contract. DirecTV Stream. Get your TV together at directtv.com. Requires high-speed internet and compatible device. Content varies by package and location. Restrictions apply.
The new year is all about starting fresh. So this year, I'm starting fresh with a fresh new living room and dining room. In fact, I'm online shopping Ashley Home Store's New Year's sale as we speak. Right now, I can save up to 30% store-wide or get 6 years no interest. Between the new leather sofa and accent chair, the coffee table, and the complete dining set, I'd say I'm off to a great fresh start. At least it sure looks that way. Tap the banner or visit ashleyhomestore.com to style up for the new year. Ashley Home Store. This is home.
This is On Point. I'm Meghna Chakrabarty, and today we're talking about the impact that the Biden administration's Build Back Better plan would have on the state of West Virginia. And that is, if Build Back Better or something like it could get through the Senate, which right now it cannot, because West Virginia Senator, Democrat Joe Manchin, says he does not support it. So here he is on Fox News December 19th, saying exactly his reasons for not backing Build Back Better.
The inflation that I was concerned about, it's not transitory, it's real, it's harming every West Virginian. It's making it almost difficult for them to continue to go to their jobs, the cost of gasoline, the cost of groceries, the cost of utility bills. All of these things are hitting in every aspect of their life. Then you have the debt that we're carrying at $29 trillion. You have also the geopolitical unrest that we have. You have the COVID variant, and that is wreaking havoc again. So when you have these things coming at you the way they are right now, if I can't go home and explain it to the people of West Virginia, I can't vote for it. And I cannot vote to continue with this piece of legislation. I just can't.
We're joined today by Kelly Allen, Executive Director of the West Virginia Center on Budget and Policy. She's with us from Charleston, West Virginia. Kelly, first of all, let's take the last couple of sentences that you heard Senator Manchin utter jest then. He says he can't go home and explain to the people of West Virginia what he says. I guess he can't explain Build Back Better. First of all, what's your response to that?
Well, we've been talking to lots of West Virginians about the programs within Build Back Better, and I think that they are broadly popular. Folks broadly support things like paid leave and investments in childcare, having their childcare and healthcare costs be lower. I think if it's hard to explain it to West Virginians, I just don't think it's hard to explain it to West Virginians. We talk to folks all the time that see the clear and immediate benefits that programs like this would have on their families.
Okay. Well, we spoke to another West Virginian, Steve Roberts, who's the president of the West Virginia Chamber of Commerce. And now regarding the business impact or the inflation impact that you heard Senator Manchin mention a second ago, Steve Roberts agrees. He calls the plan, quote, a progressive dream, but a business person's nightmare.
It adds to the deficit and the national debt over a 10-year period. It's been determined to be inflationary by university-based studies. It contains numerous tax increases on both large and small employers, and it contains very onerous regulations and fees and penalties.
So that's Steve Roberts, president of the West Virginia Chamber of Commerce. Kelly Allen, respond to his specific economic concerns there.
Well, I think that the Chamber of Commerce often doesn't speak for small businesses. We've talked to lots of small business owners in West Virginia who would like to see things like paid family and medical leave, but they don't have the infrastructure or the size of their small business to build out a program like that on their own. So if they see this as a problem that needs a federal solution. And I would also say, Build Back Better is largely paid for, and it's paid for in ways that don't affect ordinary West Virginians or small business owners. It's paid for by making the very wealthy and profitable corporations pay their fair share. And if we're worried about inflation, which, certainly families are feeling the rub of extra costs on goods, Build Back Better is actually a good response to that. Taking away $250 to $300 per child per household is not helpful in this moment. And doing things like we do in Build Back Better to reduce healthcare costs, to reduce childcare costs, are things that will really help families see lower costs despite inflation.
Yeah. I've been looking at various economic analyses of Build Back Better, and what we have to emphasize here is the $2 billion-ish or $2 trillion-ish, by the way, price tag, which has now been lowered, would be over 10 years, right? So we're talking about a maximum of $200 billion spend every year. And the Congressional Budget Office estimates that number would increase the deficit by $150 billion over a decade. But that's like 1/10, according to the CBO, of the nation's GDP. So I guess you just have to either look at it through a political lens or an economic one about would that 1% of GDP expansion to the debt be offset by what you're talking about, Kelly, families in West Virginia, for example, and their ability to do things like Joanna talked about earlier, buying tires for their car, for example.
Exactly. And I think the CBO estimate also shows in the second decade that the revenues coming in actually reduce the deficit. So it's largely paid for right away, and then it reduces the debt in the longer term. And I do think this is really a workforce bill. It contains things that allow us to grow our economy. If folks have access to childcare, if they don't risk losing their job, if they need to take care of an elderly relative or have a new baby, these are things that grow the ability of our economy to sustain increased demand, will actually address inflationary pressures.
Well, but speaking of current inflationary pressures, though, Kelly, the November consumer price index was over 6%. And the increase was over 6%. And so isn't Senator Manchin speaking directly also to West Virginians and currently maybe the squeeze they're feeling right now with those higher inflation rates?
Well, I think, again, just thinking about additional costs that families are facing and looking to January and seeing that they're going to have less money in the bank with the expiration of the enhanced CTC is really a contradiction to me.
Well, Kelly, hang on here for just a second. And I want to turn to Josh Sword, who joins us now. He's president of the AFL-CIO in West Virginia, the largest labor organization in the state. They have about 70,000 active members and 70,000 retired members. Josh, welcome to On Point.
Hi, Magna. Thanks for the opportunity to be here.
It's great to have you. I'd love to hear your response to the clip that we played from Steve Roberts, the president of the West Virginia Chamber of Commerce, who talked about Build Back Better being a business person's nightmare. Your thoughts?
Well, I thought you hit the nail on the head. I mean, you said, is this a political statement or an economic statement? And to me, it's a political statement. It's the talking points the other side has used throughout this debate. And, the thing that they have on their side is that Build Back Better is a comprehensive package. There's a lot of things in it. It can get a little confusing to understand. But when you start parsing out some of these individual components, as Kelly mentioned, and you test them and you talk to West Virginians about it, I mean, we're not 90+% of our population are going to support a number of the provisions in Build Back Better. So it'd be nice to take the politics out of it and talk about the real benefits for working families in West Virginia and the other states in our country. But unfortunately, that's not the environment we're working with in Washington, D.C. right now.
So tell me more about the workers and the families that you represent with AFL-CIO in West Virginia, because, it was the coal miners union that did put out that statement at the end of last year that sort of saying that they would hope that Senator Manchin would reconsider his opposition to Build Back Better. What have your members been saying?
Yeah, as did we. They are our members. We have 600 plus local unions, 50 plus different unions that are affiliated. So we represent a very diverse group of workers. And, I was in close communication with the United Mine Workers of America and have been throughout all this. And I can tell you one of their concerns is our concerns. There's a provision in Build Back Better that continues the black lung excise tax, which expired at the end of last year, or at least it was cut in half. The Build Back Better bill had a 4-year extension in it. So now there's some real question as to the funding for this fund. And look, this is a fund that is critically important for states like West Virginia, where you have coal miners. There's 25,000 or more now coal miners that have black lung in our country and get benefits through this trust fund. Now, they're modest benefits. There's some medical benefits. There's also some small monthly stipends for those that are diagnosed with black lung. Not very much at all, but it's a game changer when you can't work and provide for your family. And by the way, although the number of miners has gone down over the last few decades, the number of coal miners that are getting diagnosed with black lung are increasing. It used to be about 1 in 10 coal miners who had 25 years or more of underground mining experience would be diagnosed with black lung. That number is now 1 in 5. Mm-hmm. And there are a lot of different theories as to why that's happening, but it is happening. It's a fact. So we can't afford to move, into 2022 very long with the uncertainty of where these monies for the trust fund are going to come from. By the way, they're already $4 billion in debt. And the last thing I'll say about this is an issue that we like to talk about that's included in Build Back Better because it's an issue that's near and dear to Senator Manchin's heart. He introduced a bill last year to actually increase the excise tax for 10 years from 2021 to 30. And of course, given, how dysfunctional Congress is, that bill hasn't gone anywhere. So here was an opportunity to at least get 4 years of implementation in Build Back Better. And right now it's stalled out. We're encouraging Senator Manchin to get back to the table for this and many other reasons.
I should be clear and mention that we did reach out to Senator Manchin's office, of course, and ask if he could join us today, and did not get an affirmative response in that from our request. It's unfortunate because there's so many questions that only Senator Manchin himself can answer. But Josh and Kelly, Josh, when you mentioned about specific provisions that are near and dear to Joe Manchin's heart, I wonder if, maybe he is hoping for other ways to achieve those goals, and not in a giant, one huge social spending package like Build Back Better. So on that front, let's turn back again and listen to Steve Roberts, president of the West Virginia Chamber of Commerce.
This is a 2,476-page bill that contains things in it that we'd probably all like to see. And so our question then becomes, why can't we take out some of those things that we would all like to see and pass them in separate bills? Don't crowd them into a budget reconciliation bill.
Kelly Ellen, what do you think about that?
Well, I think that's a political talking point. I mean, the reality is there's only so many chances to get important legislation done with 50 votes. And I think this package contains things that do go together really well. We see this as a workforce package. This contains new opportunities for jobs, the needed supports that workers and families need to be able to succeed in balancing those jobs in their family life. And this is the chance to get it done.
Josh, same question to you.
Yeah, I think it's because, in part, the Senate is broken, and we need real reform there. And I'm not going to suggest that I have the answer as to what that reform looks like, but moving forward the way we are now, in this environment, trying to lump everything into one bill and get it through reconciliation is not good for the country. It's not good for its people. It's not good for democracy. So one of the things that we'd like to do is, or like to see them do, is have some real conversations about how they can fix the rules of the Senate so that we can meet the needs of the people of the country, the people of the government. It's really frustrating, and hopefully we'll see some real conversations moving forward. But I think that's the biggest reason why this is happening, because the Senate is broken and it needs to be fixed.
Yeah, so calling for deeper reform in terms of how the Senate works. I hear you there. But right now, Josh, I imagine there's a lot of listeners tuning in at the moment who are saying, well, one of the reasons why the Senate in its current state feels broken is because Senator Joe Manchin has so much power. And when he just utters some words on Fox News, the hope of helping families and children in West Virginia just evaporates, right? I mean, have you or other members of major unions in West Virginia, have you had conversations with Senator Manchin or members of his office? And if so, what have they told you?
Yeah, we have had conversations with Senator Manchin and his team, and we have encouraged him from the get-go, or we have made it clear from the get-go our position on the issues within Build Back Better. After he announced that he was a no on December 19th, we immediately started communicating with him, asking him to get back to the table. I believe there are some conversations that are going to take place, if they haven't already, because there are too many components of the bill that are too important to not talk about. I haven't had a chance to talk about another Joe Manchin proposal that's included in Build Back Better, and that's the American Jobs and Energy Manufacturing Act, a separate bill that was introduced, I think, in September of 2021, obviously stalled out because the Senate is broken. It's included in Build Back Better, and what it does, it provides for $8 to $10 billion worth of tax credits to manufacturing companies that crank up American jobs here in West Virginia, $4 billion of which will go to coal communities just like right here in West Virginia. Now, what does that mean? We're talking about building new facilities, converting or upgrading existing facilities. We're talking about the potential of good paying middle class jobs once these facilities are up and running. It's going to be done using Davis-Bacon and prevailing wage. So there are lots of labor protections to make sure that these are good jobs. That's the key. That's the key in all this. The end result is that we want to establish sort of an infrastructure so that we can have good middle class jobs for West Virginians and Americans. I've got a great idea. It's not anything original, but we're going to see more and more people buying or purchasing electric vehicles. Mm-hmm. So why not put some battery manufacturing plants in southern West Virginia? We've got the people and the workers there. Some of those batteries are going to be using these rare earth minerals that we're finding now. We have the technology, by the way, that's really coming from the leftover of coal mining. All right. So we can utilize that technology that we have now. The resources are here, the materials are here, the people are here. Let's use this opportunity, take advantage of this component of Build Back Better, and jumpstart our economy right here in West Virginia.
Yeah, Josh, point well taken. But of course, West Virginia can't take advantage of the opportunity for as long as their senator continues to oppose Build Back Better in the form that it currently is. So we're going to talk a lot more about what could be for West Virginia when we come back from a break in a moment. So Kelly Allen and Josh Sword, hang on here for just a minute. This is On Point.
This episode is brought to you by Wix. Are you ready to take your business online? You need Wix, the leading website creation platform that's got all the tools you need to create, manage, and grow your brand. Over 200 million people are already using Wix's wide range of solutions to enhance their businesses, like ultra-smart SEO tools designed to get you found on search engines, faster loading times to create outstanding user experiences, and payment solutions to help you boost your revenue. Plus, with enterprise-grade security built into every site, you know you're in safe hands. So whether you're starting your online business or you've got a side hustle, with Wix, you can design a site to showcase your work that'll look great on any device. You can also manage everything from one dashboard on desktop and mobile, so you can be available anywhere at any time. In the office, at home, or on the go. Want to get started? Head over to Wix.com and create your website today. That's Wix.com.
This is On Point. I'm Meghna Chakrabarty, and today we're taking a look at what the Biden administration's social spending proposal, known as Build Back Better, or at least some form of it, what impact that might have on the state of West Virginia. And of course, we're focusing on West Virginia because Senator Joe Manchin, Democrat of West Virginia, is really the linchpin in either the bill having a future or basically being torpedoed. And right now, he does not support it. I'm joined today by Kelly Allen. She's executive director at the West Virginia Center on Budget and Policy. Josh Sword is with us as well. He's president of the AFL-CIO in West Virginia, and they both are joining us again from Charleston, West Virginia. So Kelly and Josh, if you can just listen along with me for a moment. Earlier in the show, we heard from Joanna Vance, West Virginian mother of 3 kids in Beckley. And I want to listen to her story a little bit more now because she and her family have struggled to survive from paycheck to paycheck. And Joanna told us what's at the root of her family's financial hardships.
In 2017, my husband went to treatment for substance use disorder.
Now, until that time, when he needed the treatment, her husband Edmund had one of the highest paying jobs around. He worked in West Virginia's coal mines. But like so many others they know in West Virginia, Edmund developed an opioid addiction. He needed help, but his job didn't offer paid medical leave so that he could take time off for treatment. Now, that's a benefit he would have received if a social support plan like the Build Back Better proposal existed when Edmund was struggling.
He was going to go to treatment and lose his job, or he was going to not go to treatment and lose his family. Okay, had he had paid leave, he would have been able to go to his employer and say, hey, I'm taking my paid leave to go to treatment. And they couldn't have said anything, right? And he would have had his paid leave, went to treatment, came home, and still had his job. And where he didn't, because of 2 weeks of going to treatment, that set us back like almost 3 years financially. And when he got home, he had to get a new job, and the new job that he took, he went from making $31 an hour to making $12 an hour. Okay, so that was a huge cut to us. It was really hard for him to get a job back in the coal mines. I think it took him, Lord have mercy, I think it took him a year, probably a year and a half to get another job back in the coal mines. Had it not been for like his grandparents and his parents and stuff, we wouldn't have really made it through that time. You know, it was them that helped us pay bills and take care of things while we got back on our feet. If somebody lives here, it's basically because they grew up here, and a lot of people are moving away. I mean, and if something's not done, I don't know. West Virginia needs help. And I want to know who's going to help us. If they're not going to pass the Build Back Better agenda, then what are they going to do to help? Because they can't just do nothing.
That's Joanna Vance in Beckley, West Virginia. Now, Kelly Allen, let me turn to you first here. Joanna was talking about how paid family leave or paid medical leave would have really made a huge difference for her family. Can you talk to us a little bit more about paid leave for families in West Virginia more broadly? What have you found?
Yeah, and I think the point that Joanna made, that the status quo is unacceptable, is a really important one. Here in West Virginia, there's no policy that provides paid leave for workers. And that hurts workers, and it also hurts businesses. Here in West Virginia, some people have access to the Family and Medical Leave Act, but that's unpaid leave. So for folks who can't afford to take time off and lose their pay, which is the majority of folks in West Virginia, it's essentially like having no benefit at all. We see and talk to people who go back to work 2 weeks after having a baby because they can't afford to take any more time off, or folks who put off a surgery or substance use treatment or something else that they need because they are the provider for their family and they can't afford to go without that pay. And on the other side, you know, we talked to lots of small business owners who want to offer this benefit. You know, they want to keep employees who know what they're doing. They want to treat their folks right, but they just don't have the capacity to build out a paid leave program on their own without the infrastructure that a federal policy could provide. So we know this is hurting our workforce participation. It's hurting our families. It's hurting, you know, the ability of new moms to bond with babies. We have lots of folks in West Virginia who are working, who are in what we call the sandwich generation, why they're raising their kids and they are also taking care of aging parents. And they need that security to know that they can balance the really important work of caring for family members with their economic security.
You know, we've talked about Senator Manchin's concerns about inflation. We've talked about his concerns about the overall cost for Build Back Better, which, again, I'm just going to have to state the government passed a more than $700 billion defense appropriations bill. So that's $7 trillion over 10 years for defense. Build Back Better would be a small fraction of that. But he's got concerns about the deficit. He's got concerns about inflation. But I do also wonder if there's something else going on here. Because in December, when he voiced his resistance to Build Back Better, there was a story that showed up in HuffPost where they reported that Senator Manchin had been telling his fellow Democrats that he thought, for example, with child tax credit payments, that parents would use that money on drugs instead of providing for their children. Or that for paid sick leave that we're talking about right now, that folks would fraudulently use that and pretend that they're sick and go on hunting trips. Instead, now, Senator Manchin's office did not respond to HuffPost when they published that story. I don't think they even denied it, though. A non-response is just that. I mean, I'm just thinking about Joanna saying that her family's life was upended by substance abuse disorder. And Josh, so what do you think about the possibility that Joe Manchin just doesn't trust Americans and possibly even West Virginians?
Yeah, I don't know about that. I think Joanna's story is fascinating, but it's not all that uncommon in West Virginia, unfortunately. And she said something to me that resonated. She talked about her husband who had a job making $31 an hour and then, ended up with a job making $12 an hour. We see that far too much. And that's the problem. If we don't have opportunities for workers to, provide, fair wages and good benefits for their family, then you see, it's just human nature. You see all these others problems show up with that. So it's no wonder why we have, one of the most desperate opioid pandemics in the entire country because of situations just like Joanna talked about. But I'm going to try to stay positive here. We're going to try to keep Senator Manchin at the table. There are too many good provisions and components in Build Back Better for him to walk away. It is our hope that he gets back to the table and they negotiate a deal sooner rather than later. Joanna is one of hundreds of thousands of people who will benefit from the investments and all the other components of Build Back Better. It's good for West Virginia. It's good for America. That's why the West Virginia AFL-CIO supports Build Back Better, and we're going to continue communicating that very thing with Senator Manchin.
So I appreciate your optimism and the desire to keep Senator Manchin at the table. I'm going to come back to you about that in just a second, Josh. But Kelly Allen, I did want to ask you, too, about what your response was when you heard of what Senator Manchin had reportedly said about essentially not trusting American families.
Well, I certainly hope that he didn't say that in a state that's been hardest hit by the opioid epidemic. But, I agree with Josh that it's really important to stay positive. And I would also say that the data shows us that families actually do know what they need and can be trusted to do the right thing. You cited some survey data showing, over 90% of households, and I think it's 91% in West Virginia, are using their child tax credit payments to meet their basic needs, to pay for things like rent and put food on the table. So all that we know is that families know what they need. This flexibility is really important, and they can be trusted to do the right thing.
Yeah. I like that idea of whatever efforts can be made, Josh, using your words, to keep Senator Manchin at the table. But there are other people sort of surrounding him at this table in terms of folks that he's listening to, right? Josh, I'm looking at a story that came out in October from the Charleston Gazette-Mail, and they were looking at political contribution filings for Senator Manchin, and they found that employees at political action committees for out-of-state oil and gas companies, so mostly from Texas, basically dwarfed contributions that Senator Manchin received from in-state individuals, from West Virginians themselves, by tenfold. So, there are probably louder or voices whispering in his ear more closely at the table than, say, the workers who you represent with the AFL-CIO. Do you worry? Do you worry about that?
Look, Senator Manchin is a deal maker. That's his MO. He when he was elected to the state legislature, he made a name for himself as being a deal maker. When he was elected as Secretary of State, he continued with that philosophy. He was later elected governor, probably cut more deals. And what I mean by that is bringing, opposing sides together and working out a compromise. He probably worked more deals as governor than any governor in recent memory. And so he's taken that approach to Washington. We watched this very thing happen with the voting bill last year. It started with For the People Act. He had some issues and concerns with it. He got really engaged in the process, worked in a bipartisan manner to come up with another product. Now they have the Freedom to Vote Act, which has support, as I understand it, from both parties. It has some components from For the People Act. People from all over say it's a really good bill, and it's his bill, and he negotiated. He's 100% in support of it. But we have a problem. The Senate is broken, and it can't pass. So, we have to make sure that, we try to communicate very clearly with Senator Manchin that there are good provisions in Build Back Better. We have a good bill related to voting and our democracy sitting on the sidelines. All these things are in part getting stalled by a broken Senate that needs to be addressed in some capacity. Let's get to work on fixing that so we can do what's right for the American people.
Kelly Allen, can West Virginians wait, though, for the Senate to be fixed? I mean, Josh, again, I'll reiterate, I hear you, right? Because it's not just Build Back Better that's getting held up. It's all sorts of ideas that could help the American people. But fixing the Senate, while a worthy goal, is also one that, if it's ever reached, is going to take time. And Kelly, I wonder, we've just got about 2 minutes left here. What might be the immediate future for West Virginians if something like Build Back Better, at least, or its major provisions don't get passed, don't get enacted?
Without passing Build Back Better, West Virginia is going to be stuck in a status quo that doesn't work, where many folks are stuck in low-paying jobs. People have difficulty accessing childcare, affording health care. Jobs of the future are not created in West Virginia where we need to. And this is really an urgent moment. I mean, in 10 days, on the 15th, over 300,000 kids will not have child tax credit payments go into their account that have been used to help families who are living paycheck to paycheck make those basic ends meet. And if the child tax credit expansion isn't continued, the CTC is going to revert to this unacceptable status quo where the lowest and middle income families who need support the most get less than families with middle and higher incomes. So these are longstanding needs in West Virginia. We didn't just face difficulties during a pandemic. We're a state that needs this investment. It's rare that legislation like this invests in working class people, in low and middle income families, and by asking corporations and very wealthy folks to pay their fair share. So this is a historic opportunity for West Virginia. And if Senator Manchin wants to bring home the best deal for his constituents, he needs to stay at the table and get this done.
Yeah. So we've got a minute left, Josh. Last word goes to you. We quoted Senator Manchin earlier saying that if he can't go back home and explain it, he can't vote for it. But based on what you and Kelly have been saying all hour here, it sounds like families and workers of West Virginia understand pretty well the difference that these proposals would make in their lives.
I think that's the case. And the way I see it is, we have potentially one last opportunity. And I hate to be this way, but this very well could be the last opportunity that West Virginia gets for a real investment from the federal government. We've been powering our nation for decades, and that is evolving and changing, and it's going to look very different moving forward. I think we're on the cusp of something really special for West Virginia. If we don't take advantage of this opportunity, I'm not sure that we'll have any more moving forward. So it's critically important to stay at the table and get a deal soon.
Well, Josh Sword, president of the AFL-CIO in West Virginia, thank you so much for joining us today, Josh.
Thank you for the opportunity.
And Kelly Allen, executive director at the West Virginia Center on Budget and Policy. Kelly, it was a pleasure to have you today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Meghna.
And both Kelly and Josh joined us from Charleston, West Virginia. And we'll wrap up with this comment from Twitter from Renee Haggerty, who says, every 30 years or so, West Virginia gets an infusion of federal investment that changes our future. We are overdue. It's time for Build Back Better, but more importantly, for the people of West Virginia to be supported. I'm Meghna Chakrabarty. This is On Point.